morning, everyone. Morning. All right, it's about 50%. We're trying to get to 100. Good morning, everyone. All right. I'm going to do one thing that I rarely do and something that I've never done. Usually, the thing that I've never done, just to be clear. All right. Not a problem. You good? Thanks. The thing that I'm going to do that I haven't done before is, if you were here last year, the poem that you heard last year, you're about to hear again. The thing that I rarely do is explain pieces before I do them, and that's what I'm about to do now. First of all, I want to give thanks to everyone who's here. You guys are beautiful. I'm very happy to be here in person with you all. I had a couple notes that I took from what we just heard, and I wanted to share them with you. To the keynote speaker, Doc, where are you? Thank you. You had me in such a place I didn't even know where you were sitting right now. Had a similar experience when I was in Indiana with a police officer, so I'll definitely understand that kind of experience. I wanted to, excuse me, just a moment. So I want to make sure I get this right. Because the moment that we're in, I don't want to confuse. And we are, as you all know, in certain times where we have to be clear with what we are saying. A microphone, if you will. Last night, I had a pretty awesome experience. I was able to meet President Barack Obama. And prior to that, I was able to hear Adrian Fontes speak. And he mentioned, he had a story of what he called 10 little 2-letter words. And as he continued to go throughout the story, you kept wondering, okay, what are these 10 little 2-letter words? Get to the point. And I'm going to get to it in a minute. I'm going to pause as he did. And the reason I am repeating the same poem that I did last year is because the moment that we're in, certain things need to be reemphasized. And I was worried about that because I don't like doing the same thing. But listening to the doctor speak today further confirmed what was already on my heart as far as what you do. So I want to thank you for what you said. Isaiah 1:17 is a verse that my mother sent to me yesterday. She always sends me a verse every morning. And that verse, for those of you who are unaware, in the New International Version, it says, learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. We are in a time where women are being questioned if they have the capacity to understand what they can do with their own bodies. We are in a time where the people who are supposed to protect us are killing us. We are in a time where, as leaders, and all of you in this room are leaders, where we have a responsibility to walk in the shoes of the purpose that we have been given. That being said, I'd like to share this piece with you. What do you call a democracy that doesn't protect its citizens' right to vote? You call it what it is. You call it broken. In 2020, Derek Chauvin's knee was on George Floyd's neck. Breonna Taylor was murdered where she slept. We voted. And the response, an insurrection attempt on Capitol steps, fake audits, and nearly 500 laws written to restrict votes where we rest. You got to see how this all connects. Worse yet, the GOP's lawyer told the Supreme Court to its face that protecting voting rights, that democracy, hurts Republicans. No, it doesn't. Democracy is a threat to white supremacy. And we can no longer afford to ignore elephants in the room or expect help from elephants who view Black and brown voices as insects to be stalked out. This is a warning. What do you call a democracy that is not a democracy for all? It is apartheid South Africa reinvented, intended on keeping political power in the whites only section. Question: whenever in this country has minority progress come under bipartisanship? Answer, nowhere near as many times as the filibuster has been used to prevent it. Meanwhile, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin stand by like Minnesota cops, hands in pockets, while the racist filibuster leaves democracy wheezing, barely breathing, barely speaking. Meanwhile, our so-called representatives are more focused on social media posts than their co-workers trying to steal their constituents' votes, which either makes her aloof, insincere, naive, stupid, or complicit. Now, which is it? This isn't a time for political theater, Ms. Sinema. We've seen this movie play out throughout Reconstruction, come in the form of a so-called Southern Compromise, disguised as states' rights, disguised as protected racism, which birthed a nation that birthed the Klan. Ma'am, we've lived through this nightmare before and still do. As a Black man in America, I've grown accustomed to being shown how white lies, laws, and violence, and not just this year, how white lies, laws, and violence threaten Black and brown lives. I know trouble when I see it. That's why they don't want us to go to schools to teach it. That's why they don't want us speaking or raising our voices at the polls, because elections should have consequences, but racists don't believe in accountability from those they don't view as equals. Maybe some of us don't see that because we're not affected yet. This is your warning. It's time that we make amends with the fact that America's amendments never mended our racism, and that this nation has a far place to go in order to fulfill her promise to all her citizens of color. Martin told America nearly 60 years ago that she was then a century overdue in doing right by her citizens of color. Those same manacles and chains remain today throughout legislation. 6 decades later, we find ourselves on democracy's edge, and instead of removing racist rules, used to try to subdue us. Now, not in 2017 when it was F your feeling snowflake. Now, we hear calls for bipartisanship from those more focused on power than the people. Voting is power for all people, yet many people want to see Black and brown voices reduced to the size of a peephole. I thought America didn't negotiate with terrorists. Foreign, domestic, or elected. Y'all, they tried to steal a damn election. Now they want cooperation and acceptance. We say no. The only method that's effective is if voting rights for all are protected. This should be the last summer any eligible American has a harder time voting than owning a gun. The last summer, we have representatives that don't represent all the people. The last summer, I have to worry about my unborn grandchildren fighting the same fights my dead great-grandparents had to. Why do we have fewer voting rights in 2022 than in 1965? If you can't read in between the lines, listen to what my ancestors have been saying since they stole us. You owe us. Don't forget who was the first to die for this nation in battle. You owe us. Pop quiz. What's minimum wage for a slave times 24 hours a day times 365.25 times 244 years? Answer, you owe us. Don't forget whose original land I'm standing on while performing this poem. We owe us all, because a nation should never write a constitution its people can't cash again. I ask, what do you call a democracy that doesn't protect its citizens' right to vote? You call it what it is. You call it broken. But then you fix it. So let's get to work.